Hello, everyone. Welcome back to OpenLine. We have with us Dr. Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt History and Political Science Professor, talking all about politics. We started out talking state politics, the Senate race. We'll talk about the gubernatorial race in a moment. Then we'll move to national. But I want to get Brian's call. Hello, Brian.
Hey, the Schwartz is with you.
Good, yes. What's on your mind?
Listen, the doc, I'm sure he remembers me. I think he was on Nick's show. I was one of the few people last July who predicted Trump would be president. I also predicted a lot of civil upheaval, and I made an outlandish claim that he will be elected president, but he'll be the last president that we have. And Nick was like, oh, what do you mean, dictator? I said, well, he may deserve it to dissolve into something like Europe. But let's get beyond that, and let's go on to my new predictions, which will be for the next elections. Now, generally, as the professor knows, on the off elections, especially in the first term, the president's party loses lots of seats. And then when he goes to get elected, most presidents do get reelected. Doesn't matter who they are.
Right.
And then in the middle of the second term is not so bad. I predict that he's not going to lose a lot of seats in this first term, even though he could. And he's trying his hardest to fall asleep. He's not going to. Number one, it's the economy, stupid, and the people go with their wallet. I think they're going to pick up, maybe they're not going to lose any in the House where they probably should. I think they're actually going to pick up a few. And the Senate, gosh, the Democrats are going up with against, I think they got 16 elections to defend against only 8 Republicans.
Right, it's a tougher map for them.
Right, they need 60 to get a supermajority. Right now they got 52 and one goofball independent. I don't think they're going to get to 50. I think 60. I think they're going to pick up 4. I think they're going to get to 57. And I think in the House they're going to go up to 300. So,
all right, Brian. Okay, good. Well, let's talk about that. Brian, thank you for your predictions. Except that this will be our last president. That's depressing.
Yes.
All right. What do you think about what he's saying there?
Oh, I think he's I think quite right that the 2018 election may not be as predictable in the sense that the party in power usually loses seats. Again, the economy could have a very strong effect in allowing the Republicans to hold on to power. Right now, the polls actually show something else. They actually show the Democrats quite substantially ahead in the party preference for people in the House of Representatives or the Senate races. But the election, as you alluded to in the Senate, the map is actually much more favorable to the Republicans. You do have a lot of retirements in the House. You do have a lot of Republicans who seem to be stepping down, in which case that's open seats and might allow for the Democrats. I don't think the Democrats will win the House, even though I don't agree with the caller. I do think the Democrats will make some gains in 2018. I don't know that they'll take either the House or Senate, though.
In 2016, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote,
right,
and she wasn't the strongest candidate. Yet Democrats didn't do very well in the House. These districts are so gerrymandered. The question becomes how easy or difficult will it be for Democrats to really make gains?
Well, what the Democrats need to do, and I mean gerrymandering is a problem, but one of the things that the Democrats have allowed to happen is they've allowed their party structure in states like Tennessee to decline. They've gotten into a situation where they have not spent much in a lot of the states. They've become more of a coastal party. They have strong East Coast and West Coast representations and not a great deal in the heartland. And the Democratic Party, I think, has to turn to a 50-state party and try to rebuild at the local levels and grassroots levels. And you see some of that happening in Tennessee already. But that is an important priority, has to be to direct its attention toward trying to win the districts that are winnable, and there are some, and even though the Hillary's larger popular vote, but again, that was almost shaped by California and New York. It's shaped by these big states, and you just can't do that. You can't create a House majority that way.
Right. And let's talk more broadly about the Democratic Party and the state of the Democratic Party nationally right now. Who is the front runner for Democrats? Who is the leader of the Democratic Party? And we're seeing this kind of fighting still between those that supported Hillary Clinton and those that supported Bernie Sanders. There's still, I feel like, fighting there. When does that get behind the Democratic Party, if at all? And who is the leader of the party?
I think for lack of a better, the only person who really commands respect from all sides is still President Obama. Obama is a figure who unites some of the groups. Now, what he could do with that is not clear, and he's barred from running for re-election or running again. So, in a way, I think the Democrats are looking for someone to come out of either the Senate or gubernatorial races that is not really someone on the national radar now. Of course, there are figures, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, others who would like to seize that initiative. But I think in some ways the Democrats might be advised to look at the gubernatorial ranks, sort of the way they did in the 1990s with Bill Clinton. Finding someone at the governor's side who's run a race, administered a state, maybe an Ohio or a Michigan or a Pennsylvania. So one of those figures to come out and try and bridge the gap between the Sanders and the Clinton wings. The party is actually very united in terms of its legislative behavior. In the Senate and the House, it acts very strongly. It doesn't show the divisions that the Republicans have. But in the rest of the country, there is this divisions within the base that are going to have to be dealt with.
That's a good point. When you look at the House Republicans, they're divided. They can't get anything done.
Right.
I mean, they're terribly divided, and a little divided, I guess, in the Senate. So there's that. They've got their problem, but the Democratic Party also has its problem, and I know they're looking toward this next presidential race. They certainly are united in their opposition to Donald Trump, but the question becomes who's going to carry that mantle. You're saying maybe a governor. Well, we don't know.
It may be someone who's not really on the national radar in the way that in some ways Barack Obama came out of nowhere in some ways. So they may need to find someone in that man who doesn't have the baggage that some of these other candidates have.
So let's go back to state politics. And we were talking about Corker stepping down. We talked about Bredesen running on the Democratic side. On the Republican side, you have Marsha Blackburn. She would be, I guess, the front runner on the Republican side. And she would certainly be looking with a great deal of interest about whether Bredesen is going to get in. How strong of a candidate is she? How does she do you think, in a race against Phil Bredesen?
Well, I think that would be a very, very interesting race. Blackburn, I would think, would be the favorite by any stretch. She's got a state name recognition. She'll have strong support from President Trump. At least within, I think, the basic outlines of what the race would be. She would be a strong Republican candidate. This recent 60 Minutes expose about her role in fueling the opioid crisis, you would have thought might have been a very damaging thing, but because the blame for this seems to be widely spread around, it hasn't had that sort of damage. It hasn't really come to hit her chances, even though
I don't know that I've seen her talk about it too much.
Right.
I mean, before I'm willing to agree that it has not had any sort of damage. I think she's kept her head low, and she gave one statement, and she's hoping it blows over. And good grief, I wonder what disqualifies a candidate now. What is something that people just get up in arms about, or is our attention span so short that this is not an issue?
No.
You can imagine it would be something an opponent would bring up.
Yes.
But does it resonate?
Does it resonate, and does it? Would it really be as disqualifying, given that the part of the problem with this legislation is that it did not become a political issue? There was obviously some work with the drug companies by the person who was the president's pick for drug czar, who ended up having to take his name out. But it doesn't. It did not turn into a political issue, and the Democrats haven't jumped on it. Phil Bredesen might have the ability, though, to go after it if he were the candidate.
Mm-hmm. And any other big Republicans? Are there other big Republicans running for that Senate seat? It seems like they're mainly clustered for governor.
For the governor's race.
That's going to be just a fascinating race.
Yeah.
And so how do you see that shaking out? When you start looking at, Harwell and May Beavers and Diane Black and Bill Lee and all the people that are running, it's a fascinating kind of assembly of folks. What do you think there?
Well, I think that's going to be an interesting one, because I do think the posturing on the governor's race could there could be a sort of Trump effect there, who sounds or tries to be or imitate that behavior and tries to win over Trump supporters to them, thinking that the Tennessee Republican Party, like the overall Republican Party, is divided, and whether the predominant number of Republicans would be more inclined toward the Trump-type candidate as opposed to someone like Bill Haslam, who kept his distance from Trump quite considerably. And then on the Democratic side, Carl Dean is a sort of a figure who would have the fundraising, perhaps the deep pockets to really make a real challenge, and who has at least tried to, I think, position himself as a somewhat moderate Democrat.
On the Democratic side, you have Carl Dean and Craig Fitzhugh. And that's going to be an interesting battle. That it seems like school and education is the kind of the big sort of defining issue there. Carl Dean was a big supporter of charter schools, and Craig Fitzhugh's going after the vote, public school folks. That'll be interesting. That would be,
and it, again, reflecting one of these splits within the Democratic Party here. Although the Democrats, I think, would be certainly given their track record in recent elections, they'd be blessed to have either one of those candidates competing.
So is it surprising? Is it healthy, do you think, there is that primary on the Democratic side?
Absolutely. I think in this case, the Democrats now are showing signs of life in the Tennessee party that they have not shown in the last 4 or 5 years.
All right, so other news. Right now, there are governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey. How big a deal is that on the national?
Well, the New Jersey really is not that important. The Democrats are going to win that overwhelmingly. Chris Christie was so unpopular, he dragged the Republican down easily, and that's a blue state anyway. The Virginia race is interesting. It should be coming in. The Republican, Gillespie, he made it into much more of a race. The Democrats have been divided in that race. Bernie Sanders did not endorse the Democratic candidate, but the Democratic candidate has had a consistent lead. So if the Republican, if Ed Gillespie wins, it will be a big upset.
And Trump was tweeting, vote Ed Gillespie.
Yes. Although Gillespie has taken some Trump characteristics, but he's a Bush Republican in
he's one of the older school Republicans. But that would be a big deal if Republicans won that state.
Yeah.
All right, fascinating. All right, if you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We're going to take a break. Be back with your phone calls right after this.